Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This one is going to be the first of a few videos I'm going to be doing covering my thoughts on each season of Star Wars The Clone Wars as we build up to the release, of course, of Season 7, the, I suppose, apparent final season of The Clone Wars. So yeah, here we're going to be starting off with the movie and also Season 1, because, you know, the Clone Wars movie is basically just, you know, episodes of the of Season 1 in terms of production. They just decided to release them as a show, as a movie. So, yeah, I think the only real way to go through this is to pretty much just, you know, just talk about episodes, arcs, do it that way, because the thing with the Clone Wars is that most of the time the seasons, there's no particular kind of plot threads to them. You know, it gets more plot focused as we enter like the second half of Season 3, 4, 5, 6, in that the seasons do go from being sort of 2-3 arcs and a bunch of maybe one-off or two-part episodes to being more of like, this whole season is basically 4 arcs or something like that. That's kind of the way it ends up going. But at least in these early seasons, it is kind of just a lot more scattered kind of focus. But let's get into it. The Clone Wars movie, to kick it off, I did actually see this in the cinema when it came out, and I definitely enjoyed it. Like, I think it is an enjoyable movie. It's just, even compared to some of the later arcs, it's not the most interesting one, in that the main thing you'd say about this movie is that it's the introduction of Ahsoka. But I do think it is more than that, in that you do get some nice action here, and it covers a lot of ground, in that, like, you have Jabba the Hutt, Jabba the Hutt's son is involved in this, Count Dooku's in it, Ventress, like, all of the sort of the key players that you're going to deal with over the course of the Clone Wars, and that, you know, Dooku's the one we're going to be primarily dealing with as like the main antagonist. Ventress, you know, is who Dooku is training. And of course, Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Ahsoka are going to be your main heroes over the course of the conflict, and so on. And you also have like Yoda in little parts and so on. So, I think it does what it needs to do here. It's a solid, you know, arc in the Clone Wars is probably the best way to say it without being the absolute best. It does unfortunately kind of fall into that trap that, because the Clone Wars is kind of so awkward with regards to the way some of its episodes are ordered, in terms of, you know, later episodes take place before or after ones that happen here. This movie, in terms of like, oh, where do you actually watch it? Like, how many episodes of the show do you have to watch before you get to this one? Thankfully, there are lists out there that explain how to watch the show in chronological order, which is pretty much, you know, absolutely the way to do this. Like, you should watch the show in chronological order. It just makes it all flow together that much better. I don't think there's any benefit to sort of getting the sort of prequel episode later than the earlier one. So chronological order is definitely the way to go if you're getting into the show for the first time. And you know, the movie obviously has its position as well. So let's get into the actual Season 1 episodes. We start off with the first episode, Ambush, which I always really liked as a first episode. I think, even given that this is one of the episodes that you know, has an episode that sort of sets it up, and then has an episode that takes place immediately after it, pretty much, you know, that sort of thing. I really do think it's a good opening episode for the show, because it is a one-off episode. It's just one episode dealing with a conflict in the Clone Wars and getting across that idea of neutral systems and the Republic and the Separatists both trying to basically court them to join their side. And so what we get here is Dooku sends Ventress, and the Republic sends Yoda to deal with the leader of the Toydarians, which is very fun, because, you know, Watto's a Toydarian, but here we see the actual, you know, the planet and the leader of that species. So that's pretty fun, and it basically amounts to this kind of, you know, impress the leader of the Toydarians enough. Whoever does it the best will get the support of the Toydarians in the war. So Yoda and a couple of clones is up against Ventress and a decently sized army, and I think this immediately sets the tone for what the show is going to do. Yes, it's going to have some really nice action over the course of it. Yes, it's going to use a lot of the other Jedi characters as a focus when it can. But I think the thing that really stands out here is that Yoda immediately is treating the clones as individuals. He talks about them as being like all different within the Force, and that these are seemingly just 3 random clones, but like he knows each of their names and knows their personalities and their sort of tendencies and can give them that sort of advice. And it sets up that dynamic that you can really get behind of like the Jedi do care about the clones under their command, and the show over the course of its multiple seasons, of course, never forgets that. It always keeps a couple of clones as like full-on characters so you can get behind who they are. So, very strong episode to start us off there with Ambush. Then we go into our first 3-episode arc, the Malevolence arc, which I highlighted in my top 10 arcs or episode video before this one. Rising Malevolence, Shadow of Malevolence, and Destroy Malevolence. I talked about this already, but I think it's an arc that just represents kind of the Clone Wars in a way at its best. It's just 3 episodes covering like a campaign during the war. In this case, not against a planet, but actually just dealing with a new weapon that the Separatists have introduced. And this is an example of introducing sort of the super weapon type plot, but doing it differently enough to where you don't think it's just another Death Star. Because the weapon isn't so overpowered that like it's just the same thing over and over again. In this case, it fires an EMP blast, and that's why they've been able to stop everything in space and eradicate everything, so no one actually knows much details about the Malevolence because it's wiped everything out. We get Grievous introduced here as, of course, the leader of the ship, and he's obviously going to be another one of the sort of generals on the Separatist side of things. Plo Koon is obviously introduced here. Like, we obviously knew him before, but we get to properly meet the character of Plo Koon and see how cool he is. The fact that he is the Jedi Master who brought Ahsoka to the temple when she was younger, so there's immediate connection there. You really get straight into, like, Anakin and how he is as a master to Ahsoka, with teaching her, like, the right way to sort of go against the Council without directly just sort of, shouting in their faces in the Council chambers, and that, like, even Anakin, I suppose, has learned that enough of, like, if when there's things that you want to do that the Council won't agree to, there's a way to go about kind of manipulating things to get it done the way you want to, and he just teaches her that sort of distinction. And, you get your kind of parts here, the escape, the finding Plo Koon, the bombing run against Grievous's warship, and then the last episode is very unique in that, like, they're on the ship, but, like, Padme's introduced, C-3PO's introduced, and Obi-Wan takes a little bit more of a focus here. It just really comes together, I think, quite nicely towards the end. Episode 5 is a more solo episode, Rookies, but is our first full-on Clone Trooper-centric episode, as, like, this is one of those episodes that really benefits from the later episodes, because there's a few ones that set up this, and that the characters we meet here are, like, actually properly introduced to us later on in, like, the kind of clone cadet arc and stuff like that. And then the ARC Troopers episode, of course, happens with this, and so these characters that by the end of the episode join the 501st, these are some of our focus characters. Like, we follow some of these characters all the way up into, like, season 6 and so on. And I think we're even going to touch on some of that stuff in season 7. So this was a great episode just because it did just introduce you to a bunch of rookies, new clone troopers given their first assignments. It seems boring. Well, when an attack comes in, are they prepared for it? What is the difference between a sort of rookie clone trooper and a more experienced clone trooper? And we see that between the likes of, Cut Up and so on, Heavy, compared to, say, Rex and Cody. I think it's really well done here. Then we get a 2-episode arc, Downfall of a Droid and Duel of the Droids. And for one of these arcs that focuses more on the droids, this is definitely some of the better stuff that we've seen in the series, because it deals with the I think the good character thing with Anakin of he really cares about R2-D2, and it's something that a lot of the other characters don't quite get, because they do treat droids just as being machinery. But Anakin is friends with R2-D2, and, like, he knows just how valuable he is and doesn't want a replacement. So Ahsoka in this episode is actually very willing to take on the new replacement droid, but I think by the end of these 2 episodes, you see Ahsoka's character development to actually also beginning to see just how unique and sort of invaluable R2 is as a droid. And it's cool, you know, R2 gets his chance to, you know, fight the droid one-on-one. You find out that droid was a spy, it was sent to sabotage the mission and so on. It's pretty good, and it also deals with like Anakin's attachment issues and so on. So it covers a lot of different things. Next up, solo episode, Bombad Jedi, our first sort of Jar Jar episode. Like I've said before in other videos, I don't have a problem with Jar Jar at all. I think it's so overdone, the whole like everyone has a problem with Jar Jar thing. And I think an episode like this sort of highlights it, of like what you can do. In that, like, Padme goes to Rhodia on like a diplomatic mission to try and see what's going on with, you know, her former family friend, you know, Republic Senator Anaconda Farr. Why is he potentially joining the Separatists? Like, what's going on here? And we find out that it's simply that Rhodia needs, you know, food and supplies. And the Republic can't quite get it organized in time. The Separatists are offering it right now. You get why he's doing it. You have some understanding of his betrayal of Padme, but in the end, you know, it obviously turns it around. And it also introduces, you know, of course, who is Padme's nemesis? It's Nute Gunray. So it adds that rivalry to it as well, of just, he's always trying to assassinate Padme, take her out, and she doesn't like him. And this ends with, you know, Nute Gunray being captured. In part, thanks to Jar Jar and his usual blend of sort of accidentally saving the day, stumbling his way to victory, basically. And it works here because he puts on the Jedi robe, and because they can't see his face, they just think it's a Jedi. And because Nute Gunray gets spooked very easily, of course he's terrified that there's a Jedi in the vicinity, and so him expecting so much of a Jedi allows Jar Jar to come across as if he's just an unusual Jedi. So fun episode, and Jar Jar and C-3PO is a surprisingly interesting dynamic as well. Next up, we have another solo episode, Cloak of Darkness. This is an episode where we kind of pair Ahsoka with Jedi Master Luminara, and it's such an interesting one because here's your contrast. Here's your complete contrast in that Ahsoka, very high-spirited, versus probably the Jedi who in many ways most represents sort of the problems in a way with the Jedi Order. One of the more kind of maybe boring Jedi in many ways. Mainly I think people got this opinion of Luminara from the stuff that happens in Season 2, which we'll get to in like the next video on the Clone Wars. But still here you get the idea that she's very much, you know, by the rules. Ahsoka's just the Padawan. She has to stay where she is. She's overly confident and stuff like that. So she represents all of those sort of problems with the Jedi, while still being, you know, a Master Jedi and so on. But so there's a lot going on in this one. You know, it's primarily remembered for Luminara versus Ventress, which is a pretty good fight. Ahsoka intervenes, and it sort of highlights how skilled as a Padawan Ahsoka is, that she's able to immediately support Luminara like that. We also see the betrayal of the Senate Guard Argaius to free Nute Gunray. So, you know, there's little bits of plotting going on here. Like, Nute Gunray's captured in one episode, but he's freed in the next, and that happens like a few times with different characters. Next up, another great solo episode, Lair of Grievous. Kit Fisto is our sort of Jedi Master of the week, but also his Padawan, Nadar Veb, who's just been knighted, basically. And you get the contrast between like how the war is impacting the Jedi Masters versus how it's affecting the more younger Jedi. And, you know, he's, now that he's a knight, he's given a higher commander role in the army, and he's taken it a bit too far. Like, he's kind of overly attached to his clone commander, and so he loses it a little bit when his clone commander is killed, and he ends up fighting Grievous one-on-one and being killed. And it's a shocking moment, because this is an episode where Dooku purposefully reveals the location of Grievous's hideout to punish Grievous, to test him after all the failures, because he ran away from everything. Here he kills a Jedi Knight, and while he doesn't manage to kill, obviously, the Master, Kit Fisto, and this disappoints Dooku. I think it serves to highlight sort of the character of Grievous, that he is that threat right up to the point at which you enter the kind of top tier Jedi, and Kit Fisto is one of them. So your Kit Fistos, your Yodas, Anakin's, Obi-Wan's, they're the characters he will probably lose to in a fight, but Nadar Veb he is able to defeat, and it's a great fight for Kit Fisto as well, just dual wielding his own lightsaber plus his Padawan's lightsaber against Grievous. And if he wasn't so badly outnumbered by the Magna Guards, you almost feel like Kit Fisto could have had Grievous right here, so pretty interesting. Next episode 11, Dooku Captured. Another solo episode, but another very good solo episode, all because of the character dynamic. Dooku interacting with Anakin, interacting with Obi-Wan, it's a great trio. And then you combine that with the introduction of Hondo Ohnaka, and it's a fantastic episode. And this is like a two-parter as well, with the Gungan general as well. And it's like, oh, Anakin and Obi-Wan making fun of Dooku for getting himself captured by pirates. Then they also get captured by pirates, and then they all have to work together to get out. And it's fun because the dynamics between the group are actually really well done. That, Dooku has a certain respect for Obi-Wan because Qui-Gon trained him, but Dooku really doesn't like Anakin, as we know. And so, there's a fun dynamic between everyone in here. Hondo really stands out as a good character, and then in the second episode, the Gungan General, you do get Jar Jar kind of, once again, kind of helping out in his unusual way that obviously resolves this for now. Next up, we have another two-part episode, Jedi Crash and Defenders of Peace. Aayla Secura is introduced here. She's our sort of Jedi General of the week. But this is an interesting one in that Anakin gets injured, like a really cool kind of heroic moment for him. He gets pretty badly injured, nearly killed at the start of it, as they escape from the ship as it's going down and have to crash land on this planet. And we're introduced to the Lurmen, and they're this really pacifistic race of people. And it really, I think, actually explores fairly well that idea of remaining neutral in the war and them not wanting to choose a side at all, even if it results in their death. But because the villain is so violent, basically, they have to do something. They can't just let themselves be wiped out. So they're here to, protect them. So I think it's a solid episode. We get a few arcs kind of like this in the Clone Wars and also the Mandalorian as well, of just the Jedi coming in and sort of helping to train the civilians, basically, how to fight for themselves. Next up is Trespass, which, another solo episode, but dealing more with kind of a more typical thing you'd expect the Jedi to deal with. That it's not inherently related to the Clone Wars specifically, and more just this, if not in a time of war, this is kind of like the type of conflict you'd expect the Jedi to be dealing with. Just a debate over a nearby moon, and does it belong to the main planet or not? Are the species that live on this planet, the Tals, should they be considered fully sentient or not? And even if they're not, does that mean they shouldn't have their planet? It's that sort of stuff. But there's some good stuff here. Senator Chuchi is introduced here, who becomes a somewhat important character in some of the more political arcs as we go through this. So definitely a cool one, just because we're very snow environment. It's pretty cool to get to see the outfit changes. Next up is a Hidden Enemy. This is another one of those interesting episodes where this one is set prior to the Clone Wars movie, in that Ahsoka's not in it. So it's the engagement where Ahsoka's dropped off, but what happens before that. And then there's an episode that takes place before this in season 2. So this is where you really need to look at those chronological episode lists to get the exact way to watch it. Next up, we get the 2-episode arc, Blue Shadow Virus and Mystery of 1,000 Moons. And again, I really like this arc. We go back to Naboo here, and we have a threat on Naboo with a secret, separatist biolab under the planet. And the villain here, Dr. Nuvo Vindi, is very, very, I think, fun as a villain. Just someone who is so obsessed with like this virus that he considers it to be more of like a living thing than the actual sentient species of the galaxy, that he considers it like a crime that this disease was wiped out and he's bringing it back. And even just that little backstory that the Blue Shadow virus is like a legendary virus that killed so many people across the galaxy in the past. That's good world building just for the galaxy, full stop. And yeah, there's some cool investigation here. Jar Jar's involved again. Ahsoka, and of course you end up with a pretty cool situation underground where like Ahsoka, Padme, and a lot of the clones are infected, and so Anakin and Obi-Wan have to go to Iago, which of course was referenced in Phantom Menace, to get the only known antidote. And they have their own arc there on that planet of like the people being trapped by the wreckage and them feeling like it's a god keeping them there, when in fact it's actually just a separatist kind of it's actually just a separatist kind of security kind of blockade that they have to break through. So some cool stuff here. As you can see, the arcs are not just like one thing on their own. They can actually do lots of different things even across like 2 episodes there. So that's a good one for like Ahsoka and Padme getting a chance to sort of bond together as they're like on the verge of death. But next we get a 3-episode arc, Storm over Ryloth, Innocence of Ryloth, and Liberty on Ryloth. And again, I highlighted this one in my top 10 arcs of just, here is the arc that is a campaign on a planet that is really well done. Your first episode is dealing with the sort of airship getting through the blockade, ship to ship battles. Then you deal with like Obi-Wan opening the ground kind of engagements, kind of more sneaky stuff before the big battles happen. And then the last one is like Mace Windu joining with the Twi'lek forces there, Cham Syndulla, Rebels kind of reference there, to fully take back the planet. Just 3 episodes covering 3 stages of the assault on Ryloth. Very well done. And we end with the season finale, Hostage Crisis, which is the introduction of Cad Bane, and it's meant to be basically a setup for the idea that season 2's like theme is like bounty hunters. So Cad Bane definitely is one of the more memorable bounty hunters from the show, and that a lot of people would really like to see him introduced in one of the live action shows at some point, because he does stand out. He survives the series as far as we're aware, so we do need to know kind of where he goes and stuff like that. And so yeah, we reference like Zero the Hutt here. That's what happens here, forcing him to be released from prison. Senate building on lockdown. And the only hope they have is that because Anakin had went to visit Padme to have some romantic moments, some romantic time, he's there. But to show, as a show of like trust between Anakin and Padme, he'd actually given his lightsaber to her, which is a very fun moment and actually a really good character moment. But it does have that situation of like, oh, Padme's getting searched here and she's holding onto a lightsaber. Anakin's getting pursued in the halls, but doesn't have his lightsaber, so you're waiting for them to meet up to allow it to switch around. I think it's just some really good character stuff for sure. So, season 1 overall, like, it has a lot of very good stuff in my opinion. The Malevolence arc, the Ryloth arc stand out as 2 like really kind of heavy sort of battle arcs that are very well done. But then you also have like Lair of Grievous has really solid stuff in it as well. Rookies, I think, is an episode people remember a lot about. The character stuff in Dooku Captured. Ambush, I think, is a notable episode because it's one of our few Yoda episodes before obviously Yoda gets an arc in season 6. And then, yeah, a lot of the other episodes are just kind of very different. We end up getting very focused on sort of character stuff as the seasons go on, in that like we're dealing with like Ventress and the Night Sisters, Savage Press and Darth Maul, and that the Mandalorians and stuff like that ends up taking up like a lot of arcs to deal with that stuff. Whereas back here, when we were still just kind of focused on the idea of like it's just the Clone Wars. Like, we don't need to introduce Darth Maul back into things to keep it interesting. We could just have a battle on this planet and introduce a Jedi, and that's all you need. And so I think that's why a lot of the season 1 episodes do still sort of stand out, of like returning to Naboo, hostage crisis in the Senate. They're all kind of cool ideas. Going to Rhodia. So yeah, they're my thoughts on Clone Wars Season 1. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. What were your favorite episodes from this season? And overall, how did you view the first season of the Clone Wars? But yeah, that's been the video. I'll do Season 2 in like a week or so. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.